The rhythmic sound of sneakers squeaking against the polished gym floor echoed through the Crestwood High gymnasium. Ethan Carter, the school's star basketball player and team captain, darted across the court with effortless grace. With one final leap, he sank a three-pointer just as the buzzer blared. The gym erupted in applause and cheers, the crowd chanting his name as his teammates rushed to him, clapping him on the back. Ethan grinned, soaking in the adoration. This was his world, lights, applause, and the thrill of being at the center of it all. Yet, even as he waved to the roaring crowd, his gaze wandered. In the corner of the bleachers, away from the noise and chaos, he noticed her. She sat quietly, her attention not on the game but on an open book in her lap. Her brown hair framed a face of soft focus, her eyes scanning the pages as though nothing else in the world mattered. She didn't clap, didn't cheer. She seemed entirely oblivious to the noise around her. Ethan couldn't help but be intrigued. After the game, while students poured out of the gym, Ethan lingered, pretending to stretch near the court. He watched as she packed her book into a worn bag and slipped out of the building, disappearing into the crowd. "Who's that?" Ethan asked casually, turning to his teammate Josh, who was wiping sweat from his forehead. Josh glanced in the direction Ethan had been looking. "Oh, that's Claire Bennett. She's in my math class. Quiet. Works at that diner near Main Street. Why, you interested?" Ethan shrugged, brushing off the question, but the image of her remained in his mind. The next time he saw Claire was in the school courtyard during lunch. He was sitting at a picnic table with his usual crowd, teammates, cheerleaders, and a few other friends. Their chatter and laughter filled the air as they swapped stories about the game. But Ethan found his attention drifting. Across the courtyard, Claire was sitting under a large tree, her back resting against the trunk, knees pulled up as she cradled an open book. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, catching the soft brown strands of her hair. Her expression was calm, almost serene, as though she was in her own little world. Ethan watched as the breeze played with the pages of her book and the loose strands of her hair, a small smile tugging at his lips. "She's always reading, isn't she?" he mused aloud. "Who?" Sophie Hart, who sat beside him, tilted her head in curiosity. "Claire," Ethan said, gesturing toward the tree. Sophie followed his gaze, her expression tightening. "Oh, her. She's fine, I guess. Not really your type, though." Ethan didn't respond, his curiosity about Claire only growing. A few days later, Ethan found himself in the school library after practice, searching for a textbook he needed for a project. As he wandered through the aisles, he noticed her again. She was seated at a corner table, surrounded by a small stack of books. A notebook lay open in front of her, and she scribbled furiously, her brow furrowed in concentration. Ethan hesitated before walking over. "Hey," he said, leaning lightly on the table. "What are you working on?" Claire looked up, startled. "Oh, nothing important," she said, quickly closing the notebook. Ethan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Doesn't look like nothing. Can I see?" Claire hesitated, glancing at the notebook before sliding it toward him. Ethan flipped it open, surprised to find detailed sketches of characters intertwined with handwritten stories. "These are amazing," he said, genuine admiration in his voice. Claire blushed, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Thanks. I don't usually show them to anyone." "Well, you should," Ethan said, handing the notebook back. "People would love this." Before Claire could respond, the bell rang. She quickly gathered her things, mumbling a quiet thank you before leaving. Ethan watched her go, the faint trace of her shy smile lingering in his mind. A few days later, fate seemed to intervene again. Ethan was leaving the gym late after practice when he noticed someone struggling near the school entrance. The wind had picked up, scattering papers across the ground. Claire was frantically chasing them, her arms full and her hair whipping around her face. Without thinking, Ethan jogged over. "Need a hand?" he called out, crouching to grab a paper as it flew past. Claire looked up, startled, before nodding. "Thank you," she said, her voice breathless. Together, they managed to gather the papers. As Ethan handed her the last one, he noticed the neat handwriting and small illustrations on the pages. "More of your work?" he asked, a teasing smile on his face. Claire laughed softly, tucking the papers into her bag. Yeah, I should probably carry less when it's windy. Ethan grinned. Or maybe the wind just wanted to show these off for you. Claire shook her head, smiling despite herself. You're not bad with words for a basketball player. Ethan chuckled. And you're not bad with smiles for someone who usually looks like she's lost in her own world. For a moment, their eyes met, and the playful air between them softened. Claire quickly glanced away, mumbling another thank you before hurrying off. Ethan stood there, watching her retreating figure, a strange feeling settling in his chest. She wasn't like anyone he'd met before, quiet, grounded, and seemingly unaware of the attention she deserved. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt the need to know someone beyond the surface. Claire wasn't just different, she was intriguing, and he wasn't ready to let her drift away. The gymnasium roared with cheers as Ethan Carter led his team to yet another victory. But this time, it wasn't just the thrill of the game that had his heart racing. In the crowd, Claire Bennett sat in the front row, her smile lighting up the room as she clapped and cheered for him. It was the first time she had come to watch him play, and Ethan felt as if he were playing just for her. After the game, Ethan hurried through the crowd, brushing past congratulatory slaps on the back from teammates and fans. He found Claire waiting near the bleachers, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "You were incredible out there," she said, her voice brimming with pride. "Only because you were here," Ethan replied, taking her hand. Together, they stepped out into the cool evening air, the din of the gym fading behind them. Their relationship deepened with each passing day. Ethan found solace in Claire's quiet presence, her grounded nature a refreshing contrast to the chaos of his world. She was his anchor, and he loved her more with each moment they shared. They spent evenings sketching under the stars, whispering dreams of the future, and laughing at their inside jokes. But the idyllic bubble they had built was about to be tested. Sophie Hart, a wealthy and confident classmate who had long harbored feelings for Ethan, began to make her presence known. Her subtle but pointed remarks about Claire's background left a sting that Claire couldn't ignore. "You know, Ethan deserves someone who understands his world," Sophie said one afternoon, her voice dripping with feigned concern. "Someone who can keep up with him." Claire's smile faltered, the weight of Sophie's words settling heavily on her. For all of Ethan's assurances, the vast difference between their lives was undeniable. Claire worked tirelessly at the diner to save for art school, while Ethan's world was filled with wealth, glamour, and expectations she could never meet. One evening, as they sat by the lake, Claire voiced her fears. "Ethan, I don't think I belong in your world. Maybe Sophie is right." Ethan's grip on her hand tightened. "Claire, don't listen to her. You're the only person who sees me for who I really am. That's all that matters." But Claire couldn't shake the feeling of inadequacy. The pressure mounted, and eventually, she made the heartbreaking decision to end things. "I love you, Ethan," she said through tears, "but I can't hold you back." As if losing Claire wasn't enough, Ethan's world came crashing down when his family's business teetered on the edge of bankruptcy. Desperate to save the company, Ethan's father arranged for him to marry Sophie, whose family's wealth could secure their future. Ethan resisted, but his father's ultimatum was clear: marry Sophie or lose everything, including any chance to protect Claire from their reach. The day of the engagement party arrived, a grand affair filled with opulence and false smiles. Ethan stood by Sophie's side, his expression stoic. As the ceremony began, he leaned close to her. "I don't love you," he said quietly. "I never will." Sophie's eyes flickered with something unspoken, but she said nothing. The officiant continued, his words echoing through the hall. When it was Sophie's turn to speak, she hesitated. The room fell silent as she took a deep breath. "I can't do this," she said, her voice firm. "I deserve someone who loves me, and Ethan deserves to be with the person he truly loves." Gasps rippled through the crowd as Sophie stepped back, giving Ethan a faint smile. "Go find her," she whispered. Ethan didn't waste a second. He ran out of the hall, his heart pounding as he searched for Claire. He found her sitting on a park bench, staring at the lake they had once shared so many memories by. "Claire," he called, his voice breaking. She looked up, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Ethan? What are you doing here? I couldn't go through with it, he said, kneeling before her. None of it matters without you. Claire, I'm so sorry for letting you go, but I'll never make that mistake again. I love you, and I'll fight for us, no matter what it takes. Tears filled Claire's eyes as she threw her arms around him. I love you too, Ethan. For the first time in what felt like forever, they were free. Free to love, free to hope, and free to face whatever came next, as long as they were together. Ethan and Claire spent the next few days together, savoring their newfound freedom. They knew life wouldn't be easy, but the promise they made to one another gave them strength. Every moment felt like a small rebellion against the forces that had tried to tear them apart. But the repercussions of their actions were inevitable. Ethan's father, enraged by his son's defiance, sent private investigators to track them down. Rumors began circulating in Crestwood about the scandal, and the media caught wind of the dramatic fallout between the influential Hart and Carter families. It wasn't long before Ethan and Claire realized they couldn't stay hidden forever. One evening, as they sat by the lake just outside town, Ethan broke the silence. Claire, I need to figure out a way to cut my father's control over us. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his frustration. Claire placed a hand on his arm. Ethan, we don't need anything from him. We can make it on our own. Ethan looked at her, admiration shining in his gaze. I know, but if I don't confront him, he'll never stop. He'll keep trying to control me, and worse, he'll keep coming after you. The next morning, Ethan returned to Crestwood alone. He walked into his father's office, determination etched into his face. His father, seated behind a grand mahogany desk, looked up with an icy glare. You have some nerve coming back here after the humiliation you caused, his father sneered. I'm here to make one thing clear, Ethan said, his voice unwavering. You're done controlling me. I won't marry Sophie, and I won't sacrifice my happiness for your business. His father leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips. And how do you plan to survive without the Carter name? Without the wealth and connections that come with it? Ethan stepped closer, his tone firm. I'd rather have nothing with Claire than everything without her. I'll make my own way, and you won't have any say in it. For a moment, his father was silent, the weight of Ethan's words hanging in the air. Finally, he gave a bitter laugh. You think love will protect you from the real world? You're a fool. Maybe, Ethan replied, but I'd rather be a fool than someone who lives without love. Ethan returned to Claire that evening, a new sense of freedom washing over him. He had severed ties with his father, knowing it would come with challenges, but for the first time, he felt truly in control of his own destiny. Claire welcomed him with open arms, relief flooding her expression. Are you okay? She asked. Ethan nodded, pulling her into a tight embrace. I am now. We'll figure this out together. And together, they did. Ethan took on small jobs, and Claire began selling her artwork, slowly building a life for themselves. Their love became their foundation, a testament to their resilience and commitment to one another. Years later, Ethan and Claire sat on the porch of their small, cozy home, watching the sun set over the hills. Claire's sketches adorned the walls inside, and Ethan's laughter echoed through the house whenever friends came to visit. Life wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. Ethan turned to Claire, a soft smile on his face. I wouldn't change a thing. Claire leaned her head against his shoulder, her voice warm with contentment. Neither would I. And as the world faded into twilight, they held on to the one thing that had always been theirs, each other.